Hi, I'm Matt with State of Flux here with another Everyone's a Critic 52-week movie challenge. We are way the F behind, so it doesn't matter, but we are doing week challenge of 29, which is a film based around a sport. The movie I chose was Raging Bull, released in 1980, aspect ratio 1851, runtime 2 hours and 9 minutes, genre, it's a drama or sports film, rated R, starring Robert De Niro, Kathy Moriarty, Joe Pesci, Frank Vincent, and Nicholas Colasanto. I can never remember his name. It's Coach from Cheers. Directed by Martin Scorsese, produced by United Artists, written by Paul Schrader, Meredith Martin, Joseph Carter, and Peter Savage, based on the book by Joe LaMotta. Music by Jim Heinrichsen, although he was really the music editor. There was no traditional composer. Awards received. It won for Best Actor, Robert De Niro, and Best Editor, but was nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Sound. Why did I choose this particular film? Well, on the last video of my weekly movie challenge, I had teased maybe doing Rocky. And then it hit me. I'd never seen Raging Bull. I'm not a huge Scorsese fan, kind of in general. Spoiler alert. Having never seen Raging Bull, I used to always get into arguments with people as to what the better movie is, Rocky or Raging Bull. I love that first Rocky movie, and I think some of the other movies have qualities to them. I never had a fight in that game because I hadn't seen Raging Bull. Now I can go and talk it thoughtfully. So, had I seen this movie before? No, I had not. Would I recommend this film? Why or not? Why not? No, this film is horseshit. It's bullshit, if you will. Raging bullshit. And anybody who says that this film is better than Rocky, and I'm talking the first Rocky, not the sequels, it's easy to dilute the quality of that first picture through the subsequent sequels. They're off the rocker. Rocky is by far the superior film, but this isn't a conversation about Rocky. However, I will touch on this again later at the end. But Raging Bull itself suffers from the same problems, virtually all the same problems that I had with Joker. The problem when you do a character study, but are too afraid to actually place commentary on said actions of the character, is that the way you frame the character study allows you to sympathize with the gross person that you're meant to. At least authorial intent is to probably find him to be a disgusting human being and get what he deserves. However, you can't help but feel sympathy whenever bad shit happens to him. And he's a despicable man who is constantly inviting just disgusting experiences into his life and then lashing out at those around him. Now, that sounds like that's what the character study is. You're studying this, but the moment that you start to feel sympathetic towards that person and almost wanting to root for him in his retaliation towards his brother or his wife or just any person that he lashes out at throughout this film, then the film is doing a disservice for trying to even broach this topic, because you are not placing adequate commentary on the disgusting nature of a human. I feel like you can make a movie where you feel like you can understand where a person is coming from, but you're not necessarily the way this film is framed is you're not meant to necessarily understand why his actions are. You don't understand why he does what he does. He's just kind of this lone wolf character that's going to do shit, and he does. You watch the film and the frame starts to emerge that, like, when bad shit happens to him and he lashes out, well, they had it coming because they fucked him up. And, like, he's just this kind of person, and, like, they had to have expected that, right? Wrong. That's improper use of the tool of filmmaking. And I've had this problem with other films of Scorsese's. He just doesn't, his movies and me just don't really vibe well. I think he's an exceptional artist, but his art is not necessarily for me. I can respect that. But he has made films that I do quite like, that I have responded well to. This is not one of them. And what I found more baffling, and the real reason why I chose to watch this over Rocky, was the day that I had watched, or had chosen to do Rocky and pivoted it to this, was a day that I had found an old YouTube clip of Siskel and Ebert doing their top 10 films of the decade of the 80s. And both of them selected this film as the best individual film of the 1980s as a whole, that 10-year span. And that is mind-boggling to me, because there were other films discussed on that conversation that were infinitely better than this, be it My Dinner with Andre, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or just like so many other ones that they named, and it breaks my heart that this is the one that took their top spot. And I thought about that maybe it was, I had walked into this with expectations of it being incredibly good, and it just didn't really live up to that hype. But I'm pretty good at keeping myself balanced and keeping expectations largely out of there. And I honestly didn't necessarily have high expectations at all from this film, because I don't like Scorsese in general. And I know that Roger Ebert, at least, had said that he was the greatest filmmaker on, like, American soil. So, like, I know that he and I had that disconnect, so that didn't necessarily weigh into my my anticipation for watching this. It was just simply through watching that video that I was like, oh, that's right, there's another boxing movie that we haven't talked about. But, yeah. I have one last comment to make about the film, but I'm going to touch on it because I'm assuming they're going to ask the question about what did I think of the ending. Alright, moving on. Which character were you most able to identify with or connect with, and in what way? I guess it would be the second wife, who just takes his bullshit, because I'd been sitting there taking his bullshit for the past 2 hours, and then finally is like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to throw in the towel, if you will, on this relationship, and I'm going to take the kids, and I'm going to get the fuck out. And if you come near me, I'm going to call the cops. That whole scene. I was just like, good fucking riddance, man. Like, why did it take you this long to do that? And, yeah. So I guess it would be her. And if I were her, and like, the film is just constantly sexist and stuff like that, and heavily misogynistic, which is like true to character, but it's just adding layers of things that I just traditionally dislike. It's true to character, but as I already don't like it, and I wasn't responding well to the movie, it just was adding fuel to the fire of my distaste for this film. But he starts like throttling her with like, did you sleep with my brother? How many other people have you slept with? And all this kind of stuff. And she's like, I fucked everybody. I would have too. Like, he's a horrible human being. I would have fucked every other person in this movie besides him. Ugh. Alright. Best line or most memorable quote? I think the most memorable quote is the, I could have been a contender, I could have been somebody, but I'm a bum, I'm a nobody. Which is a great quote from a different fucking movie, and a much better one. That this film has the audacity to end with a quote from On the Waterfront is just heinous, because it happens right at the end of the film, the last scene of the film, that this quote hits you. And then it's just like the final boxing punch, the knockout punch that told me that I should have been watching a much better fucking boxing movie than this one. Oh my god. The only rage this movie brought to me was an unbridled rage. Raging both. Fuck it. Were you surprised by the ending, and what would you do differently? No, I wasn't surprised. I knew like a lot of biopics, they either like end on a triumphant note or they end on like the death of whoever they're biopicking. Um, as I knew that Joe LaMotta wrote the book, I knew that he was still like kicking it. So I assumed it wasn't gonna end there. And this dude was like just a walking tragedy and walking travesty. So I figured that he's probably not going to have any triumphant thing. This whole thing is going to be a morose lamentation, if you will, of a life that could have been. Um, so like I guess that quote is fitting, but I, I I didn't I wouldn't have done anything differently outside of I would have never made this movie. I would have framed this movie to just like every time he is being a piece of shit, really add in contextual commentary of how he is being a piece of shit, and maybe not frame the character study through his eyes and his experience, but maybe the wife's eyes and the wife's experience, or the brother's eyes and the brother's experience, or any of the number of people that he beat the shit out of. Are you familiar with this sport? If so, yes. If so, how? I'm familiar with boxing in that I like boxing movies. Boxing movies, like, I'm not a macho fella. I don't like just beating the shit out of another person. That's not my vibe so much. However, there is exceptional things to do visually with a boxing movie that you can't necessarily do with some other sports, just due to the amount of people on teams or something like that. Like, I think basketball would be, which is weirdly enough, basketball is a sport that I despise. It's my least favorite sport to watch. I would actually would rather watch golf than I would watch basketball. However, visually, basketball makes for a much more entertaining looking thing to look at while you're watching a movie. There's interesting stuff you could do with a camera, but the amount of people on a team is what would hinder that, and that's the same thing that would hinder a soccer movie or a football movie. I think like baseball movies are a little different, and you can have some visually interesting stuff to play with there, but it is the boxing movie that really soars because it's two people, rarely more than two people, if ever, and you can frame an entire film around the experience of how a person got to that point and really put weight and emphasis into the importance of a fight. And just by the sheer nature of how boxing works, it's very fluid. It requires a lot of movement, it requires a lot of speed, but you can also slow the camera down. It's almost a dance, and it's the greatest sport to capture on film for a feature. And I think this film, like, it deserves a lot of its Oscar nominations. In total honesty, cinematography, I get it. This is a well-shot movie, and it has a couple strokes of genius with like when the film spontaneously goes into color when you're watching old home reel footage, which traditionally in a color film would show up in black and white. This film does the inverse of that. Like the cinematography is quite has brushes of genius there, but it's a well shot boxing matches when you see them, very artfully done. It's not going for the more reality of a boxing match that you get in some of those Rocky movies, the first one, or particularly a lot of the later ones, or the Creeds or whatever. But it has a style to it. So though I don't personally watch boxing, I think it makes for the best sports movies. Do you have a new appreciation for the sport and those who choose to participate in it? Fuck no, not that part. Okay, why or why not? So, do I have a new appreciation for the sport? No, I think I've always appreciated the sport with its use in film. I've never understood, and there's a great line in Rocky, like, you have to be a, what does he say? Like, you have to be a total idiot to be a boxer. Like, that it's true. Like, you're willingly going into a situation where you're gonna get hit, and you know you're gonna get hit, and you could be hit so hard that you die in the ring, and that's things that have happened. Um, and so I've never necessarily understood the reason why people need to do it outside of just like testosterone fueled like machismo. Um, However, I've appreciated it in the cinematic landscape. And do I have an appreciation for those who choose to participate in it? If they're anything like Joe LaMotta, no. Or Jake LaMotta, then absolutely not. I think I've said Joe multiple times as Jake LaMotta. But that's how little I give a shit. No. If they're anything like him, he is a despicable human being, and I'm sure there's great boxers out there. There's exceptional human beings, and even people who have done bad things always have the capacity to do good, and are not always complete sleazeball fuck rags like that. This dude. Sorry for all the swearing. I just the rage that it inspired within me is pretty intense. Would I like to add anything else? Going back to Rocky, let's just rewind back. This film, much like Rocky, is a character study. The one thing you can hurl at Rocky that you can't hurl at this film, or I didn't think so anyway, was that Rocky, while being a fairly good character study of the man who, he's also painted like kind of poorly. He's a leg breaker. He's a numbskull, and he is not particularly likable, while also having an aloof quality that makes him kind of likable. But it's a dude who recognizes his own kind of filthiness and is trying to rise above it, and is given a 1 in a million opportunity to do so. The one thing you can hurl at that movie is that movie takes quite a bit of goodwill and from On the Waterfront. Like, if you watch Rocky and On the Waterfront, like, to say that that film inspired Rocky is cutting it, like, it doesn't necessarily quite work. Rocky definitely, I think, directly lifts certain aspects out of that, and it's our goodwill that we just kind of acknowledge that, yeah, those movies are pretty similar, and then just kind of walk away from it, because it's only certain aspects within the first half hour of the film that really are lifted from On the Waterfront to establish the character of Rocky. But then that film goes its own direction, and it does so fascinatingly. Again, a character study of somebody who is not necessarily the most pleasant person, who lashes out at people and hurts people, sometimes those that are close to him personally, or is disappointing to those around him, and while also being a leg breaker, while also being a bum. But there's something in that character that wants to be better. And the film kind of shows that anybody can rise. All you need to be given is an opportunity. Whether that opportunity is like being handed a golden opportunity like he had, or just like somebody believing in you. That movie is a boxing movie just because of its ending. Really, it's a love story, and the opportunity he is given is to interact with Adrian when she finally opens up to him. Now, that scene where they kind of get together in his apartment reads a little creepy now. However, the intent of the film is quite a bit stronger than that. And I think their relationship throughout the entire franchise is emblematic of that. Now, it's also easy to beat back down at Rocky because not only of its On the Waterfront like basis, but when you think of Rocky, you can't help but think of Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky 5, Rocky 6, Creed, which is Rocky 7, and Creed 2, which is Rocky 8. And each time you're diluting that first story, the relevance of it, the importance of it, and that character study therein, especially with how off the rails those movies went in the 80s. I think they've grounded it and brought it back to a more personal, real place with Rocky Balboa and the subsequent Creed films, to give it the longevity and the legitimacy that that franchise honestly deserves, and as well as bringing back a legitimacy to that original film that was gone even, honestly, by the second movie. This being a standalone picture, Raging Bull, it's easy to point to the qualities of like, hey, this has got Martin Scorsese. And like, I think our appreciation for Rocky was just a fluke. Scorsese knows how to do it. This is a real boxer. This is a real story. This is what they're really like. This is a character study as it should be done, because it's done, quite frankly, in the style that like Taxi Driver and King of Comedy and any number of other character studies that Scorsese likes to make has done. And but they neglect to look at what is the point of Raging Bull? Like, this guy's despicable. The end. There's not much beyond that. Like, why do we let him be despicable? What is examined in this film that has any commentary on it? There's nothing. It's just showing us that this guy exists and we all let it happen. And he got his comeuppance. But was it really enough? And the fact that the film is framed in such a way that you feel pity for him or sympathy for him is kind of fucked up, when he ultimately does deserve a lot of the shit that went down in his life, that he brought on himself anyway. So comparing this film to Rocky, I think, is disingenuous. They're character studies about a boxer, but they go about their character study in two completely different ways. And weirdly enough, I think Sylvester Stallone went about it in a much more elegant and a much more thoughtful way, which is weird, especially if you're watching the news lately with Stallone being like, I want my money, these are my characters. But whatever. Should I, at the end of the day, have watched Rocky? Abso-fucking-lutely. I regret watching this, honestly. But I guess I don't. I should have watched it at some point in my life, and I'm glad I did. Anyway, Raging Bull was my Week 29 challenge. My Week 30 challenge is a remake! Sweet! Those are great. I will try and come up with a remake that, damn it. I'll get into my thoughts on remakes in the next video. Thanks for watching. I'm sure you're gonna come at me with your thoughts on Raging Bull and how I'm just atrociously wrong. But please, drop me down in the comments. Just listen to my whole video, and please, acknowledge if you felt like I had any positives in my argument against why this movie is not good. By the way, I give it 1 out of 4 stars. Drop down in the comments below of what you thought of my review. Did I hit you a little bit, or am I just completely off base with this? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do all that. Thanks for watching. Peace.